1960s. Did a stint at UW-Madison, worked as a teacher, worked in as an activist, and ended up somehow spent time in many different places, but accidentally stumbled upon Brittany, and I'm assuming fell in love with Brittany. There's a lot to fall in love with, and has written several books, but the two that we're the most interested in is I'll Never Be French, No Matter What I Do, published, I believe, in 2009, and then Mastering the Art, or not quite, Mastering the Art of French Living, published in 2018. And I think that's fantastic. When you're in France, people don't accept you as French unless you've been there for several generations. So it's always interesting to tell your anecdotes about this. So Mark can talk a lot better about himself than I can. So I am happy to pass the mic on to Mark. Merci.
Thank you. And thank you all for showing up and sharing your Netflix time with me. I appreciate it. That's tough competition. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the books. I'll do a short reading, and I know there's only about an hour, so I'm going to leave as much time as possible for questions and answers. And then if you want me to read something from the other book, I'm happy to do that also. So let's start with the prelude to the book, which is I'll Never Be French, No Matter What I Do. I went there with a girlfriend, and I'll explain all of that a little bit later, but it really all begins after house. And when I buy the house in France, that house, I promised myself three things. First is that I will pay all of my bills on time, no questions asked, because bad money between friends and neighbors is not a good thing. The second thing I promised myself is that I will not sleep with any of the women in the village, because good sex between neighbors and friends is not a good thing either. But that turned out actually to be easier than I expected. Sleeping with me myself was that I would not write about the experience, that I was not going there as a writer, even though I am a writer, and I was working on a collection of short stories at the time, but that I wanted the experience to be immersed. I wanted to be as much a part of a community as I could. I want to go into it as a writing project, which would separate me. I would be observing. It would be more anthropological and sociological than it would be just living there. And that's really what I wanted to do. That first summer that I was there made it pretty clear to me that this was a place I could be very, very comfortable. I met people I felt very friendly with quickly, and knew that this was a place I could easily return to, and have a good life, and be quite happy living the bicontinental life, you know, months here and months there. So I never intended to write about it. But I did write letters, and I did tell stories. And after about 15 years of writing letters and telling stories, and people asking for more and wanting more and finding them very funny, French people and Americans, after about 15 years, I started to write. And that produced the first book. And I'll read you a little bit from the beginning so you can get a sense of how this all began, at least for me. It begins with a girl. It always begins with a girl. And even though we don't make it through the summer, through even half the summer, she gets me there and changes my life. It doesn't matter what happened or why. It's one of the best gifts I've ever been given. It happened like this. It's 1991, and I'm in her apartment, living her third of our bi-coastal relationship. 1/3 in New York, 1/3 in California, 1/3 apart. And I'm probably the only person in Manhattan looking forward to a summer in the city when she says, honey, let's go to France. I close my book and listen, petrified. I hate to fly and I don't speak French. This isn't a good idea. I was in Paris in 1966 and they loathed me. And I don't think I've changed that much. So let's go to Saskatchewan, I say. It's not the same. I know, she says. I know, I say. They speak English and we can drive. Don't worry, she says. I'll do everything. It's late May, a beautiful spring in New York, and this is her busiest time at work. As far as I can see, there's no need to start studying. One week later, she announces she's found the perfect place. It's special, magical. Antibes, Britain, just as you can go. Finistère. What does that mean? The end of the world. That's when I panic. I go to the bookstore and read in a guidebook that Bretons aren't French, but Celtic, linked by language and culture to the Irish, Scots, Cornish, and Welsh. So maybe I do have a chance. On the other hand, they've been French since 1532. Why chance it? I go to the Café des Artistes and write her a note. Great work. Could you ask if the place is on a country road, quiet, sunny, and large? Does it have a good bed, hard mattress, running water, hot running water, remembering my stay in Paris, a stereo, car, separate studies writing, a coffee maker, shower, bath, at least 2 floors, farm animals in the vicinity, a washing machine, dryer, and dishwash, a bar in the village, a boulangerie, a market, a post office, bikes, and neighbors who want Americans living next door. I leave it on her desk thinking, Saskatchewan, here we come. The next day, she leaves me a message on her answering machine. We have it, 1,000 a month, we are. I wait a minute, put on my happy voice, and call her at work. Hi, got your message. Oui, she sings. Does it have all those things I asked about? Certainement. The last thing I need complaining every day. It really has all those things? That's what the lady said. Her name's Sally. She's English and just returned from the house. She lives in Massachusetts, and you can ask her yourself. So I do. I call her, and she says yes to everything. There's no way out. I'm going to France. So that's how I got there. And that first year that I was there, the first time I was there, the first summer, I met people and they showed me around, and I wound up seeing a house that I wound up buying. And so the book is about going to France, not wanting to go to France. It's about meeting people, Monsieur and Madame P, Jean and Sharon, other friends, who I felt very, very compatible with. It's about seeing and experiencing Brittany, the light, the sky, the geography, the architecture, the culture, for first time in fusion. It's about buying the house and fixing it up. It's about fighting my neighbor over trees and a 50th birthday party. So it's about a lot of one-time things. It's about a lot of things. I'm only going to meet people for the first time once. I'm only going to buy the house once. I'm only going to fix it up in a major way once. Hopefully, I'm only going to fight with my neighbor about the trees once. That was the first book. It was published in Polish. It was published in French. It was well received in both Poland and in France. And as a result of the French publication, I also learned a lot about legal system and publishing rights, which. So after the first book was published, I went back and people at first didn't know, but I gave them copies of the book because I wanted people, even though it was only published in English initially, I wanted people to see it and to know from me that it exists, because I didn't want them to hear it from somebody else. Because, you know, you never know what the reaction is that people are going to have when you write about them. So I wanted to be the one to walk them through. And for the most part, things went well, except for one letter from one lawyer, which I'll talk about if you want. So when the book came out, a friend of mine commented that he liked the book, but there's nothing about here about day-to-day life. It's the first time going to the fete, the first time going to the fair, the first time going to the market, the first time doing this, and this. By the time I wrote the second book, I had been there 20 years. And so the second book is about learning how to get what I want, or what I think I want, because sometimes what I want, I found out, is not exactly what I wanted. Often I find out what I need, which is different than what I thought I wanted. Anyhow, the second book is about day-to-day. It's about driving, banking, shopping, eating, cooking, the medical system, speaking. My French is miserable. I can have a decent conversation with anybody who wants to talk to me, but I can't enter a French conversation. It's way too fast for me. You know, the most people who want to talk to me are my friends and shopkeepers. Shopkeepers will stay with me forever as long as they think I'm going to make a sale. So, you know, we have those conversations going on. So the second book is about, you know, again, day-to-day things. What happens when you have a car accident and it's your fault? How do you pay a parking ticket? How do you get money out of your own bank account? You know, things like that. How do you shop when you don't know how to read the label and can't pronounce the product? And most importantly, you know, what do you cook for French people when you invite them over for dinner? And when is it possible or acceptable to touch the tomatoes? These are all things I learned the hard way. And these are all things that are in the second book, which is Not Quite Mastering the Art of French Living. So I can stop there and answer questions, or I can read a section from the second book, whichever you prefer. I want to give you as much time for questions as you want.
I think we have plenty of time if you want to read a little more.
Okay. I'll read you about going to the pharmacy. Okay, the pharmacy, you probably all know this, you know the stuff better than I do. The pharmacy is the first line of medical defense in France. You have a medical problem, you go to the pharmacy. And they have much more authority and power and rights than our pharmacists. They can actually dispense medicine and issue some prescriptions. So this is the chapter on to get what you need or want through the medical system. The chapter is called The Hypochondriac's Delight, because France truly is a hypochondriac's delight. Professional that she is, recognizes this symptom. She swings around the counter, pries the box from my hand, and destroys it after it fails to easily open at the place marked clearly in red, Ouvrir ici. She punctures the mouth of the tube with the point on her pen, squeezes a generous amount on my foot, and rubs it in with her naked fingers. It feels so good, I want to return 3 times a day. Merci, merci, I say. Except for the non-kiss cheek kisses, it's the first time a woman has touched me since I left Donna in California. A biento, I say, and to put her at ease, I add, au revoir. A month later, I returned with the utas. At first, I was bug bite. And disgusting and painful as hell. I show Madame P a welt the size of a jumbo shrimp under my qu'est-ce que c'est? La'uta. This is the first I've heard of it. Flies, bees, bats, fleas, sure, but the uta? Qu'est-ce que c'est? Excuse me, qu'est-ce que c'est? What is it? And more important, and most important, what does it look like? C'est possible je regarde? This is one creature I need to avoid. Madame says, c'est invisible. C'est un microbe. Un microbe? Oui. Il habite où? Where does it live? She points at me. No, no, habite en la uta. She takes me outside and points. The garden, the grass, the land, the flowers, and me. Then she explains in great detail what the uta is and what it does. I don't understand much until she says that magic, 1 in every 3 words, that's the same in English. Larva, the singular of larvae. Holy shit, living baby utas are growing inside of me and eating me, and that's not even the worst of it. The well, my warmest, moistest, most private parts, would they apparently like as much as I do. No wonder I've been scratching my crotch for a week. And a week, so I'm back in a wedge at the pharmacy. Bon, the same lady sings when it's my turn. Comment sont les champignons? The champignons. Bien, bon, au revoir. Bon, she says, wondering, I'm sure, what today will bring. S'il vous plaît, I say, and scratch my hip. La uta. It's August. Ut. When the uta appear. It's also hot, which the uta like. But she's not a clerk. She's a professional. And she's not going to give me any medicine or treatment without seeing what's wrong and making a diagnosis. She walks around the counter, and before I can say Jean-Paul Belmondo, she's pulling the elastic on my shorts and looking down my pants. Lucky for me and her, I'm wearing underwear. Because until today, it itched so much around the elastic, I took them off. 3 female customers are in the shop. None of them look at me, and none seem to think this is strange. The pretty lady pharmacist touches one of the welts on my hip and says, ah oui, la uta. Diagnosis over, she hands me a cream in it and charges me €5. It looks like the same box she gave me for the champignon. I stand there holding the box, waiting, hopeful, expectant. She smiles and walks away. So that's a visit to the pharmacy. So, any questions, comments?
And you should be able to, it's not a huge group, so you can unmute yourself and just ask. It should go okay, or you can raise your hand.
It was very funny.
The
Thank
two
you.
meetings were wonderful.
Well, thank you. It's a little more difficult living through it.
Just out of curiosity, because I've been having trouble with this, did you, in 20 years living there, learn how to conjugate verbs?
No, everything is, for me, is first person present tense. There is no past, there is no future. It makes me a very Zen person while I'm there. I am right there, right then.
It's easier
Most of
for you.
my friends can tolerate it, and most of them have given up trying to correct me. Part of the problem is my hearing is not good enough to replicate the sound, so I gave up early, and I was also too lazy to really study. So I've sort of developed my own patois, and basically my friends say it's a French that nobody else would call French. And for the
Why
most
did you
part it
come
works,
back
but
here?
it does. Well, I have a job here, and I lived here, and my friends were here. I wouldn't want to live in the village full time. It's a village of 500 people, and it's 1 to 3 months. I wouldn't want to be there in the winters. It's cold and wet and damp and dark, and I like my sort of bicontinental life. I like being, actually it's tricontinental. because I spend a lot of time in New York and France. It works fine for me. Going from city to country to suburb.
And what's the biggest city that's closest to that little town
The
that you live in?
really biggest city is Brest. It's about 40 minutes away in people.
Okay, nice.
And it's an easy ride to get there. And there's a local commuter train in the next village about a mile away from me. And there's a commuter train that runs into Brest. So it's very easy to get there. Also, Quimper is only 20 minutes away, if you know Quimper, where the pottery comes from. That's smaller. That's about 80,000 people.
Nice.
As rural as it is, it's actually very accessible. Brest is an international airport. The ferry comes in
Oh, wow.
Roscoff, which is about an hour away on the so it's very accessible. There are direct flights to England and Spain.
What's the name of the town again?
The village that I'm in is Port Launay. The name of the village in the book is a fictional name. It's a combination Breton and French name.
I read today.
And Breton means village of, and bien. Sorry? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
That the Parisians this summer are traveling in large numbers to Brittany to avoid the pandemic.
Yes. In March and April, Brittany had some of the best numbers, but the numbers are going up now because of all the tourists coming in. Yeah, and you know, my friends who have B&Bs and gîtes are all renting out completely. So yeah, a lot of people coming in to Brittany, especially Phoenix. That's as far west as you can go, and it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
So it sounds like you've been living in Brittany for about 20 years. Is that correct? 25 years?
30 now. This summer, I bought it in 91, 92.
Oh, wow.
I bought it in 91. So it's almost 30 years. And this summer will be the second time we haven't gone in 29 years.
And in 29 years, how has your relationship to France and Brittany and the people there changed?
Well, the biggest change was when the first book came out, because when I'll Never Be French came out, it was published in French. And it was published, you know, the village really featured it. So it was in the, you know, all the local newspapers. The Maison de la Presse had it in its main window. There was, you know, book signings, and so a lot of people knew about the book, which sort of changed their relationship to me. People would ask me after the first. Luckily, the first book didn't come out in 10 years. But after the first book came out, people would stop me and most often tell me they liked it and they were happy I wrote it and that it didn't present. Because in France, Bretons have a stereotyped culture. They're viewed often as being hard-headed, stubborn, also as being sort of romantically fantastical dreamers. So they were happy to have something that portrayed them as just decent, funny, just funny in the way that they engaged with the world, not making fun of them. I mean, one of the things, there are a couple of hard choices I had to make with the book, although I didn't realize it at the time. But this is the first book. I very, very consciously decided not to write the way Peter Mayle had written. You know, I'd read A Year in Provence. I loved A Year in Provence. I thought it was and French people are the foil in the book. And I didn't want to do that. So I was going to make myself the foil in the book. I mean, it's their country. It's the one that's out of place, not them. So that was a writer decision, that I was not going to follow the Peter Mayle methodology and make fun of local people. And of course, that made things easier for me with local people when the book did come out in French. It was pretty much accepted by everybody except one couple who were not happy. So to answer the question, so often after the first book came out, people would stop me and talk about the book a little bit, but then they would say, if something happened, is that going to be in your next book? So they were very conscious at that point that I was a writer and I was writing and I was writing about them. So Jean came over one day to fix something. He always came over to fix something. And he said to me, hey, is this going to be in your next book? Because his fixing the stove was in the first book. So people were aware, and whether or not that changed relationships, I don't know. I didn't feel that it did. And I also later came to use it to my advantage when I had some shopping mishaps and I wanted people to sort of worry about what I would write about them. So I got to use it that way a little bit. My fight with my next door neighbors about the trees went on for years until the trees went down in a storm. But all of my relationships.
What about these trees? What was the fight about the trees?
I had, on both sides of the house, I had a string of cypress trees, 30 long, 30 in a row, about 30 feet high. And the neighbor was complaining that it blocked the sun from getting on his property. And, you know, I offered to trim them and I offered to cut them a little bit, but I really didn't want to take them down. So we battled about this on and off for over a decade. And then finally they did go down in a storm. But I have them on the other side. But this involved going to the notaire and getting letters verifying that the trees were safe, legally safe, because they had been there a certain amount of time. And, you know, one step takes you into another, and you get what becomes a conversation with a neighbor becomes a legal matter with the local lawyers and the Marie and the mayor. And all the neighbors take sides as to who's right and who's wrong. And, you know, one time I came back from California to France, and there was an orange day glow line across all the trees at 6 feet height, because the French law is if your trees are within 6 feet of your neighbor's property, they can demand that you cut your trees to 6 feet in height. And my trees were within 6 feet. And he put a day glow orange paint 6 feet high across all the trees, showing me where they needed to be cut. And the neighbors split on this. Some of the neighbors said, well, he's right, that's what the law is. You're within 6 feet, he can demand you cut them. Other neighbors said, well, yes, he can demand that, but he's got no right to touch your trees, he's wrong. So the neighbors get involved in all these discussions as well.
Thank you.
Hi, Jim.
Thank you, Mark, for the stories. I really enjoyed them, but I would love to hear about the tomatoes.
The tomatoes, when to touch the tomatoes.
Yes.
Very, very dicey. I found out the first time I was there when I did touch them and got slapped. I went to the, well, what I call the veggie lady, who's got all of her fruits and veggies out on the stand in front of her store. And as I would do, I reached for the best tomatoes, and if I found one I didn't like, I put it back and took another one and did this, and, you know, started to put them in the bag. And she was in the shop, so she didn't see me at first. But then she saw me and came out and, you know, grabbed my hand, dumped everything out of the bag, explained to me, and I understanding no French, but I understood her completely. You do not touch these tomatoes. I do. And then she started asking me questions like, at first I didn't understand the question. She would ask me like, when do you want to eat them? And I didn't know what she was getting at. Finally, I figured, am I eating these today? Am I eating these tomorrow? Do I want to eat them in 4 days? Because she would give me different, different selections. If I was going to have it today, it's obviously a different tomato than tomorrow. But I'm a New Yorker. My thinking is, she's going to give me the garbage tomatoes. The tomatoes that are about to rot. I don't want the garbage tomatoes. I want the good tomatoes. That's why I was picking them. So we went through this. So she gave me the tomatoes. Of course, I didn't know which ones I said today and which one on Thursday. She gave me the bag of tomatoes. I went home. Everything was fine. And then I went to the supermarket. And I was shopping, and there were tomatoes. There you can touch your own tomatoes. So I'm touching tomatoes, choosing the ones I want, putting them in the basket. Go to the front, and go to the checkout stand. Looks at me like, "What are you doing? This is all wrong." And again, I don't understand anything. And she then takes the tomatoes and all the other fruit and takes it back to the fruit part of the supermarket and weighs them, because the person who's buying them weighs their own. So I learned then at that supermarket, you weigh your own. Now again, in the States, you put 3 in, weigh it, and then put 3 more in, hand it forward. That's what people do. But here apparently that's not an issue. You put your tomatoes in the plastic bag, you weigh them. You have to find the right tomato, because there are different kinds of tomatoes. So you have to find the picture of the right tomato on the electronic scale thing, push the picture, and the price pops out on a little sticker. You put it on the bag, you go back to the front, they scan it, and then you go home with your tomatoes that you have selected and weighed. And then there's another supermarket in town. And in that supermarket, you don't weigh it, they weigh it. And I have no idea why each one is different, but they are different. And if you don't do it the right way in the right place, there's a problem. That's tomatoes. That's actually all fruit and vegetables.
Can you talk a little bit about food in Brittany and French and food in Bretagne, and how it affects you as an American?
Sure.
It sounds like you've spent about half your life in Brittany, so it must have affected your.
No, I'm
way
about
of
2 to 3
eating.
months. The food is okay. The native food is crepe, and they are delicious. Like probably not you've had here. They're much thinner. They're also, except for the dessert crepe, they're made with buckwheat, so they taste differently. And inside of them are meat, seafood, veggies with different kinds of sauces. That's sort of the historic Breton food. Mussels are, you just pick them up off the ocean. They're everywhere, all year round, everywhere. Mussels, oysters, it's seafood land. There's fresh seafood every day. There's a poissonnerie in town. Guy goes out and gets fresh food every morning, 3 in the morning, and is selling it by 5 and 6. About an hour away is the home of the Boulogne oyster. It's seafood heaven. The seafood is it's wonderful. Now, in the years that I've been there, for instance, the Atlantic salmon is gone. Okay, when I was first there, salmon was everywhere, wild salmon. You can't find wild salmon anymore. It doesn't exist in the Atlantic. If they get it at all, they get it from Norway, further north. but it's very, very hard to find. But the food is delicious, the traditional Breton food. You know, I mean, everybody's got gardens, the veggies are fresh. So the food is never a problem. You know, before I bought this house in France, I was thinking of buying a house in Wyoming. And because I had been to Wyoming at a writer's colony to write my short story collection. And I also fell in love with Wyoming, largely for the same reasons, actually, even though they're both physically very different. It had to do with the light and the horizon. The skies in Wyoming are huge, and so are the skies in Brittany. The horizons are low, very low in Brittany. The skies are huge. The cloud formations are spectacular. It rains a lot, so the cloud formations are just spectacular. And the light in Brittany is that, you know, it's that northern light, that northern painterly light, which is why all the Impressionist painters went there to paint. It's beautiful. And Wyoming was like that also. It had that kind of light and that kind of horizon. But in Wyoming, I realized three things. One, if I had a house in Wyoming, I would drive there, and because I would need a car. And driving from the Bay Area in California to Wyoming would take me 3 days. Two would be the food. What I would get would be processed food. Everything would be frozen and processed, and you know, who would want it? Whereas in France, would be, I haven't had to deal with any of that sort of stuff. It's been very, very welcoming. As an American, through the Bush years even, it's been very welcoming. The French know how to people from politics and individuals, and they're quite happy to argue with you and not have it get personal. So fitting in is not
Do you have
Anybody
another
else?
book? Yeah, I'm sorry. Other
I
questions?
am. I'm working on. No, I'm working on a third. I'm writing what I'm writing because it's too easy to talk myself.
Aw.
What's happening here?
It's a connection problem. It'll come back. Oh, Mark, you're muted.
Aaron, can you unmute Mark?
Okay, how's that? Is it
I think it's a little better where it seems like you're freezing more now, but you're not muted.
okay? Yeah, I can see you now too.
But anyway, we missed what you just said.
I don't know what I just said.
About your new
What
book.
you're writing now?
Oh yes, I'm writing. I am working on a third book, but I don't talk about what I'm writing because it's too easy to talk myself out of it. Once you start talking about it, it sounds silly. So I need to work on it before I talk about it.
Mark, you
And
said,
do you write both about France and things that are maybe more in the U.S., or you don't? We can't.
Yeah, mostly my creative writing now is about France, although I guess people in the neighborhood would say it's also about local politics. I've been doing a lot of local politicking this election year, so that was a bunch of writing, but it's a totally different kind of writing. The creative writing is about France at this point. I haven't written a short story in quite a while.
you said that your book was written originally in English and then translated in French. Did you write it in
Yes.
French or did you have somebody translate it?
Oh, I had a later. She did. I totally lucked out with this. Her name is Beatrice Vienne. She translated of the great English century novels, and I got her as a translator for my book. Actually, I didn't get her; the publisher got her, and it was a pleasure working with her. And you know, translations is such a difficult thing to do. This is a person who has never been to the United States, and she actually understood most of the cultural references, which I found astonishing. And she was also willing to work with French friends of mine. I've got several French friends who are really completely bilingual, and they read the English versions of the book, and she showed them her French translations, and they would make minor suggestions about word usage, saying, and this is way over my head, right? Up, from down on it. But they would say, that word, or that's not a. So, and the book is out in French. It has a different title, a title I never would have had. Everybody frozen?
Just you.
I lost everybody?
No, we're
No,
we can hear you. We can
Okay,
see you.
Yeah,
all right.
you're back.
Okay, it's coming in and out. I don't know where, if it's at my end or I don't know what.
And so you mentioned your book was translated into Polish.
Yeah, both of them are actually in Polish, the first and the second.
And French, English, and Polish. What is the story behind?
There's a
behind
long
that?
history of affinity between Poland and France, going back to Napoleon. When Napoleon liberated Poland, there was a connect on his way to Russia. When he liberated Poland, there was an affinity that developed. And for instance, the language of the Polish aristocracy was French. That was the language that they used in court. That was the language they used in diplomacy. And when they all got deposed, they came to Paris and lived in Paris. And the largest immigrant group, at least up until recently, in Paris are Poles. So there's a major connection between France and Poland. And the first book, when it first came out, sold 15,000 copies in Poland in the first 5 or 6 weeks. It was very well received.
Mark, can you go over the 2 titles of these books again so I can go out and get them?
Oh, sure. The first one is I'll Never Be French, No Matter What I Do. And the second one is Not Quite Mastering the Art of French Living.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. I also have a newsletter. If you go to my website, you could sign up for a newsletter, which sort of sometimes comes out quarterly. But it does feature some of the writing I'm doing. So I have put some of the pieces for the third book in the newsletter. So you can see some of the things going on in there. And you could just sign up on the webpage.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
And if you
Also,
can
Mark,
speak the,
could you write the name of the name of the town in the chat? I didn't understand the name of the town.
It's Port, P-O-R-T.
Yeah.
Launay, L-A-U-N-A-Y.
Okay, thank you.
It's tiny, 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 but you'll
Yeah.
certainly find it on Google Maps. It's about 500 people.
Thank you.
It's right on the Brest-Nantes Canal.
Wow, cool.
So, anybody else? Do it while we have a connection.
Is it difficult to find people to be like handymen or handy women to take care of your house when you're gone?
No, again, I've totally lucked out. I've had a couple of three English people who live in town permanently, and they are handy people extraordinaire. And then there was my friend Jean, who recently died, but there was nothing up to the age of computers that he couldn't fix. Once we entered computers, he was out of his realm. But before that, everything was fixable by Jean. So again, I was very lucky because I am totally incapable of doing any of that kind of work. It would be a disaster if I tried. Actually, it has been a disaster. But thankfully, I've had friends who would come over and either show me what to do or do it themselves and make it possible.
Did you have a lot of family members coming over for vacations to stay with you
Yes,
after you bought
sure.
the
Once
house?
you have a house in France, everybody comes to visit you.
Yeah.
It's actually quite nice, though. I mean, if you can space it out. I mean, again, over the years, I learned, for instance, up until a year or two ago, I would go by myself. I would go for a month by myself, and I would use that time for writing. And I wouldn't have any friends come during that time, really for two reasons. One, because it was my writing time, but also because when they left, I got lonely. And even though I know all these French people and I do all this other stuff, living with someone and then living alone is different. And I missed the people after they left. So now, well, first month is mine. Friends can come after that because then they sort of line up. You know, nobody usually stays longer than 5 days. And you get to spend in ways that you never get to spend time with here. You have those long, leisurely French dinners, you know, 4 or 5 hours sitting at a table. I mean, I don't spend 4 or 5 hours with friends here. I mean, doing nothing but eating, except now during COVID. But before that, you know, it was, you have a quick dinner, you go to the movies, you go to a show, you hear some music, you're doing something. This way, you're actually living with people. And the surprises are interesting. And occasionally they're negative, but not often. Most of the time they're positive. And I've liked having friends come over. And I really like being able to show people the area and the beauty of the place. For instance, Brittany has some of the highest tides in the world. You can have 1,500 meter coast difference from high to low tide. The beaches at low tide are immense. You just walk and walk and walk, which is why every year somebody drowns out there, right? Because they're too far out and the tide comes in too fast, which is also because the tides go out so far, the beaches are extraordinary. Brittany would be every bit as a tourist attraction as Provence if it wasn't for the weather. The water is sparkling clean. The beaches are pristine, white sand that we're used to, at least on the east coast of this country. You know, Jones Beach, Cape Cod, that sort of stuff. But you could get 2 weeks straight of rain. You could plan a 2-week beach vacation and get rain every day. So it's not a big tourist area, which is fine for me. I'm there for 2 months. So in that 2 months, I'll get the rain and I'll get plenty of sun.
The people from Bretagne are very proud of their language, the Breton.
Yes.
Which is seems very different from, is that something that you're interested in or
yes.
looking into?
The language base is Gaelic. It's linked to Irish, Welsh, and Cornish. And you know, up until the 1960s, where you had the politics of independence and self-identification in Brittany as well as everywhere else. For instance, up until the 1960s, there isn't, you know, all these French men are named Jacques and Paul and Jean-Paul there is because there was an approved list of names and you had to name your kid one of these French names. In the 60s, that's thrown out. And local areas like Brittany, parents can then name their kids traditional Breton names. So now you have names like Noe and Jan and Michel and Breton names. The same thing happened with language. The Breton language was an Eagle language up until the 50s and 60s. It was just wiped out, as were other local languages in France. Now, there was for a little bit of time in the 60s an independence movement in France, just like the Basques in Spain, and like the movement in Ireland as well. The independence movement, it still exists, but it's pretty small. But the language schools are flourishing, and they're flourishing so much that now it's legal in Brittany to have a Breton immersion school where all of your courses are taught in Breton, and French is your second language. You learn French as a second language. And Breton schools, again, obviously within Brittany, are booming. They're very, very popular. Their Breton newspapers have been revived. Breton printing presses, books written in Breton. So yeah, all of that stuff. I mean, it's small scale. It's not major, but it is thriving. I don't know what's going to happen after COVID and how well they'll do and how long they'll survive.
My mother grew up reading Bécassine. I don't know if you know that. It's a comic book, and I think Bécassine she's from Brittany, and she's maybe a nanny in Paris, and she a little bit like a Mary Poppins, but not very smart and kind of goofy.
Of course, yeah. We have some of the logos on different things. Yes. Yes. So also Asterix.
Asterix.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Thank you so much for talking with us. It's about 6, so if anyone has any last question, otherwise.
Thank you.
Hi, Jim.
Thank you.
It's great to see Jim and Susan.
And I don't see Jim and Susan.
They're muted.
Oh, they're muted. They didn't want to talk.
Oops.
Oh, no. I lost you, Jim.
Come on.
Oh,
There you go.
All right.
How are you?
Good to see Mark, you, my friend Kim Bergeron, and Susan Bennett, the Madison crew.
Yeah.
Yes, and Andy Cohn.
And
All
Andy
right.
Cohen. Yay!
Yay, thank you so much. This has been great fun. Thank you, Jim, for helping set it up.
Oh, my pleasure. I love your books. I've
I
read both of
appreciate
them.
it.
Oh, yeah.
Buy
I'm going to
buy his
recommend it.
books.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll recommend them for my book group.
Yay.
Oh, good. Well, I'm happy to answer questions if anybody, in the book group has questions.
Mark, thank you very much. It's been interesting.
Thank you. I've had a great time. I hope you have.
Yes.
Yes.
So is the best way to buy the books to go to your website?
You can, I don't know if you can get it at my website. Amazon has it, and you can get it through most local bookstores. They'll probably have to order it. But yeah, it's available as an ebook. And actually, the second one is also available as an audiobook. And they're both available in paper hardback.
Oh,
So,
that's good.
yeah. And they're available in Polish if you want to try.
don't speak Polish.
And in French, right?
The first one's in French, but not
Okay.
here. You have to get it through Amazon France. Yeah. I think I've lost you again.
We hear you and we see you.
Okay, it's starting to freeze up a little bit. Hey, Susan.
Yes.
Oh, great to see you guys. It's great to see you. So, well, thank you
Thanks
so
a lot.
much for this.
Thank
Thank
you.
Yes.
you. Hopefully we can
Um,
have you visit Milwaukee sometime in the future.
I would love to come for the Bastille Day Festival.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I will do that. I will let you know. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much.
And if any read the books, feel free to email me. I will respond.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, Mark.
Take care, Jim. Thanks. Bye-bye, Susan.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank
Thank you, Ann. Susan. Goodbye,
Thank you.
Kim. Thanks.
And Aaron, thank you for letting me in at the last moment. I forgot that I needed to email you.
No problem. Bye. Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.